moving this. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So as Frank introduced, I will now do a short presentation about what is Ngsi Ld and what is DCAT. So what I will talk about, I will briefly introduce what is context data. Then I will present how to access it with Ngsi Ld and how to discover datasets with DCAT. So context data and why it matters, because many applications depend on real-world data changing over time. So it can be basically a lot of things like environmental sensors, mobility data, weather stations, and so on. And you can imagine a lot of things that are in the real world and changing over time. And behind this, there are some challenges. Data is distributed. You have data everywhere and in every places. Data formats differ. So basically each producer of data has its own format. So it's complex to deal with this. And finally, data sets are hard to find. And once you have found, discovered a data set, it's also hard to know what they contain. So we have two problems to solve. First one is how to discover data sets. And once you have discovered a data set, how to access the data that belong to the data set. To address these two challenges, we typically make use of two complementary standards. The first standard is DCAT, which is a W3C recommendation, which helps us to address the first challenge, which is how to find data sets. The second standard that we use is Ngsi Ld. It's a NetC standard, and this standard will help us to address how to access context data. So to picture this quite simply, you can think of it like DCAT is the library catalog and Ngsi Ld is reading the book. So more on the details of DCAT. DCAT is a standard to describe datasets. It is used quite a lot on almost all the open data portals. There is some DCAT in it to describe the dataset. On research data catalogs, also DCAT is used quite often. And data platforms also make use DCAT to describe what they contain. And DCAT describes catalogs. So catalog is the thing that contains datasets. Of course, it describes datasets which have some metadata like title, description, keywords, creator, license, temporal coverage, geographical coverage, and so on. So all the metadata that help you know what is contained by the datasets and to know if it can be of some interest for you and if you can use the data that belongs to the dataset and so on. The distributions are the thing that provide access to the data. And with these three concepts, catalog, datasets, and distributions, you have main the main purpose and the main objective of what Decat is about. And as a bonus, you will find also often the data services. And data services is the term that is used to describe anything that does something with the data. So it can be some AI process, some basic processing like calculating averages and sums, or providing access to the data. So in that sense, an Ngsi Ld context broker can be seen as a data service. And Dcat also describes some other less frequently used objects. So all what you have to know is catalog, dataset, distributions, and data services. And Dcat defines some organization about data and metadata, which is quite simple. You have a catalog. A catalog contains datasets, and datasets have distributions, which tells how to access the data. To illustrate this, some examples. So a catalog could be weather data. In this catalog, you have a dataset which would be marine weather observations, and you have a distribution which has some properties and some metadata, but the most important one, which is called endpoint URL, which will tell where you can go to access the data. So typically it will be an API endpoint to tell if you want to access the data that belongs to this data set, go to this API and use it to get the data. And an example data service could be an Anoxia prediction service that will use the marine weather observations to do some prediction and to warn the user if you have some probability of anoxia in the water. Now that it is more clear about Dcat, let's jump to Ngsi Ld. So Ngsi Ld is a standard API for context information. And what we mean by context information is the description of entities and their state. An entities can be pretty anything. So I've written here some examples like a sensor, a vessel, a weather station, weather observation, city infrastructure. So anything, any object can be an entity. And then on top of that, applications can use the API to query entities, manage entities. So by manage, I mean create, update, delete entities, and subscribe to changes. For instance, you want to be notified if some threshold is reached, or if some event happens in a given location, and so on. So that there is some push mechanism to be notified when something happens. More on a more technical point of view, so Ngsi Ld describes the world using entities and attributes. And attributes can be properties, geo-properties, relationships, and so on. And the core concept behind this is that an entity can be any physical or virtual object. So like I said before, it can be anything. A property is the value of an attribute, which can be more specified, like for instance, a geo property, which typically will be a location, like a point or a polygon, a line, and so on. Or else it can be a language property. If you have some multilingual requirements, you can define a language property and have this value in different languages, Japanese, English, French, and so on. And a relationship is a link to another entity. I've put an example here, but on the next slide, it will be more detailed. So here, it's an example NGSA identity. So this is an example of the data that we will manipulate and that we will retrieve when interacting with an HSID context broker. So here we have an entity. It has an ID. In HSID, entities always have a unique identifier. So it's a vessel with some number ID. It has a type. So you know that this entity is of type vessel, and it has some properties. So it has a name, Kumaru, number 11. It has a destination which has been observed at a certain point of time because it's a vessel, so the destination can change when it has reached the harbor and move to the next destination. It has a speed with some value 0.5. It has a unit code, like for many numeric values, you want to associate a unit code, which is also part of the NGSILD standard. And it also has an observation date because it's the speed at a given point of time, and of course the speed changes over time. And finally, I was talking about these geo-properties. So it has a location, which is a point, even if a vessel is not a point, but it is summarized as a point, which also has an observation date because, of course, the vessel is moving, so its location is also moving. So an NGSID context broker allows you to retrieve this type of entities, and using the observation date, you can also do what we call temporal queries. So for instance, to get the evolution of the speed of a vessel over time, or to get the list of its destinations and so on. So you can have access to all the temporal history of all the entities that are inside the context broker. Like I just said, the context broker stores and historizes context information. And for the hackathon, we have prepared some data sets. So we took some data near Tokyo, so that it is more interesting for the participants in the hackathon. So there is a data set about vessels in the Tokyo Bay. So this data set is ready. You can use it right now. And we are now preparing a second data set, which will be about marine weather in the Tokyo Bay. So this one, we are working on it. It should be ready in 1 or 2 days. And you can query these data sets using NGSID API. And I've provided some links to help you getting started using the API. So there is the NGSID primer, which gives a good overview of the HTTP API with some examples of the most common requests to retrieve things, to query entities, and to update entities, and so on. If you want to go deeper in the NGSILD specification, you can read the full specification, and you will know all about all the details. And you can always drop me an email if you have any question. To also help you getting started, we provide here a typical workflow. Typically, you will start with a discovery phase to discover the catalogs and datasets. So the first query will give you all the catalogs that exist inside the context broker. With the second one, you can get all the datasets that belong to a specific catalog, so the Stormglass catalog. And with a third request, you can retrieve all the entities that belong to a dataset called Stormglass Weather. And once you have this, you can continue by querying data. So the first query is used to retrieve a specific entity, and the second one is an example of a query, for example, to get all the vessels that have a given destination. And in the Ngsi Ld Premier, you will have some other examples of these query entities and the query language that is used to query the broker. So what's next? You will find here the base URL to access the context broker with a tenant. Don't bother too much with the tenant. We will provide this for you. We are working on a sample postman collection. Also, it will be finished, I think, tomorrow or Thursday, so that you will have some example queries to start using. And if you want an access, send me an email to get access to the API, and I will send you a client ID and client secret to be able to access the API. And finally, if you want or need more data or other data, same as before, just let me know, drop me an email, and we look if we can inject more data into the context broker. And thank you. That's all for me. And if you have any questions, please go.
Thank you, Benoit, for this introduction to Ngsi Ld Dcat Ap. We have a question in the chat on connecting the Ngsi Ld Dcat and how this connects to the DSP catalog protocol itself. Don't know if you have an idea on that.
I think that it will be more a question for the next presentation.